will present this item.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here and allowing me to provide you an update of Flagler County's beach management plan in consideration of the resolution of the intent to use the uniform method of collection for non-ad valorem assessments. Just want to start by saying that I truly appreciate the partnership and the collaboration that we've had with residents on the Barrier Island throughout this process. And over the past few months, we've worked really hard on public engagement to share where we are with the plan. We were able to gather some valuable input in putting this together. You'll notice there are some updates since we last met, so we'll go ahead and get started. Here's where we are, what we've been able to accomplish since June of 2024. There is some significant work. This is something that I had showed you previously with all of the work that the county staff has put together on this process moving forward. And we continue to gather more information as we move forward. As you know, we did a series of community outreach, town hall forums, meetings. There is more work to be done. We also had conducted the property owner survey. Again, a lot of this is information that you've already seen, but for the benefit of the public, I just want to show it again. We did conduct the beach nourishment survey. This is a look at what was sent out to the property owners in the affected area. Here's a summary of the findings of that survey. 96% of the public were aware of the current challenges facing Flagler's coastline. 90% felt that beach preservation was important to their overall quality of life. 93% felt that the need was urgent for a structured beach management plan. 80% felt that erosion control and dune and beach renourishment needed the most attention. And then overall, you had 75% that say that they supported some sort of a contribution to beach management. And then it kind of just breaks it down, the various amounts. So when we looked at the initial construction, again, this is not new, but for the entire coastline, it's just under $105 million. We do have portions coming from the federal government as well as the state. If you focus on the far right, the local contribution for the entire coastline would be $37.5 million. And that's largely, or it is in the unincorporated area of Flagler County. I think that this slide is a little misleading, as I've stated before. It gives a sense that this is really only for the construction activities. Throughout the entire beach management project, we've committed a lot of resources at the county in the way of labor and expenditures, which includes, acquiring easements, doing surveys, programming and public outreach. The resources don't only include staff within administration, but also the county attorney's office, our communications team, engineering, our GIS, drones, our budget, our procurement, and even TDC with their Dodge the Dune campaign. So we do have a gap, though, of the $37.5 million in the construction aspect. And here's a look at that local funding strategy of where we hope to fill that gap. As you know, we had applied for state grants to work on program funding in that reach, which we anticipate somewhere around $15 million. We have set aside in the current fiscal year 25 budget $5 million. However, that does leave a shortfall of $17.5 million. What we're looking at here is for the construction of Reach 3, and we anticipate the timeline need for that is going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. So good news is we have got 2 or 3 years to kind of fill in that gap. And then once it's constructed, we have an obligation or hopefully a desire to renourish that and maintain it once it's constructed. So when you look at the total breakdown, this is based on 6-year project intervals. So the top portion of this is how much money would be required at every 6 years. And the bottom segment is how it's broken out for the equivalent annual cost per section. So when we're looking at this and we're focusing on the unincorporated Flagler County, we know that we need to capture about $8.2 million annually so that we have the $49 million available at the time that we're going to do the renourishment. So again, looking at the local funding strategy and how do we anticipate funding this? As I mentioned, the renourishment would be every 6 years. There is potential eligibility for DEP, especially as we work to identify additional critically eroded areas. The local share is $8.2 million. Again, this is just for the northern 10-plus miles in the unincorporated Flagler County. And then we've already established $5 million annually, although future funding is going to be subject to budget approval, and we have quite a ways before we even get to that point with moving forward with fiscal year 26 and then the following years. But we know that we've got a shortfall. We're trying to fill that gap of $3.2 million, which seems to be the target that we're working towards. So when we look at the public access parks within that section of the unincorporated area, Flagler County has 6 county parks. There's also State Park with Washington Oaks. When you look at the amount of money projected or estimated to be needed in that area annually, it's somewhere around $1.7 million. That section of public access does equate to just under 21% of the project cost. But I think that that does provide justification of general fund contribution to support the publicly owned beach access areas within the stretch of the project. So when we look at potential funding opportunities, again, this is not new. This is something we've talked about for well over a year. We are looking at tourist development tax. We are looking at potentially a special assessment or tax, whether it's in the way of a municipal service benefit unit, MSBU, or a taxing unit, which would be the MSTU. Other sources would be general revenue, whether it's the small county local option half-cent sales tax. Also, we talked about possibility of carving out a dedicated millage, not a millage increase, but out of the existing millage. And then once we have funding established, it's certainly something that we can go out and bond should we need to. The bottom two are more related to disaster recovery, so that we can go after FEMA and state DEM dollars post-disaster recovery. So that doesn't change. We'll continue to do that. However, in the funding mechanism that we're looking at, there will be a need for some local match dollars. So even if we do have a declared disaster at the local level, there's still an obligation for about a 12.5% of those costs. So just looking at the agenda item that you had approved earlier, adding that in for our outside consulting agency to do the analysis, we're estimating that that local match on our portion is probably going to be somewhere close to about $2 million. So just to give you an idea of the amount of money that's required at the local level following post-storm. So when we look at potential funding opportunities, again, this is a slide that you've seen before, where we're trying to work towards the funding gap. What we had established here was potentially the use of a carve-out of millage, not a millage increase. If we were to look at like a 1/10 of a mil reallocation, it would give us about 1.5 million, which would leave the remaining gap of 1.7 in the way of an assessment or tax, whether it's an MSBU or MSTU. We do have just under 6,400 parcels within the unincorporated area. When we're looking at the total project cost, it's not putting it all on the people that live within that area because that total local share is about 8.2. What we were looking at applying is the 1.7 million. And then if you look at this slide, this is kind of gives you the outline. We've got the 4 different project reaches, but also looking at the green bar along the bottom, that gives you the proposed area of the northern 10 plus MSBU unincorporated area. So this would be from the southern border of the town of Marineland to the northern border of Beverly Beach. from mean high water line to the east side of the Intercoastal Waterway. This is what we are referring to as the unincorporated area of the barrier island. So just to be clear, if you live in Flagler Beach, Beverly Beach, Marineland, Bunnell, or Palm Coast, you are not part of this MSBU. Regardless of what your mailing address may say, Palm Coast does not exist on the barrier island. So I just want to make sure we have that clear. So as we're looking at the MSBU benefit analysis, there is a benefit to the local property, and it could be established by actually the cost of the project itself. There's prior court cases that have already established that for us. When we look at the benefit analysis details, supporting property values, paying for a dune and beach renourishment directly benefits the property owner by protecting their property from erosion and storm damage, thus preserving and potentially increasing their property values. It also provides coastal protection and enhanced dune, replenish beaches, provide better protection against storm surge and erosion, making it a more attractive and safer place to live. It also improves the recreational capacity because everybody knows that a well-maintained beach can improve recreational opportunities which further enhance the quality of life and the desirability of their property. It also increases the beach environment and habitat protection. This is an area that's called out in the county strategic plan where we are looking to protect and manage our natural resources, and that also includes protection and renourishment of the beaches and the dunes. So when we look at the assessment benefit area, as I mentioned previously, it is the area between the town of Marineland and the town of Beverly Beach. And then when we move forward and we're looking at the methodology, looking at the property value, properties with a higher property value will end up paying more. It's really about their location on the barrier island. Looking at properties that are closer to the beach, they likely have higher property values, therefore they would end up paying more. When we look at the benefit received, we are considering a flat base rate applied to every property within that section of the barrier island that we identified. And then we're looking at the assignment of weighting the benefit. So 50% would end up coming from property value protection. The other 50% would be that base rate. So when we had previously shown this is really the combination of how we got there, splitting the 1.7 million that would be needed between the 50% base rate and 50% in value. So in looking at the different assessments, the group by cost, this is looking at the total parcels that we have. The largest percentage is somewhere between an assessment of $151 to $300. And then looking at the bottom table, it seems that the average property value among the barrier island is somewhere around $407,000 in property value, which would equate to just under $250 in the form of an assessment. And then when we looked at funding, creating this MSBU, what portion of that actually comes from the folks on the barrier island. So we know that we needed that $8.2 million at the bottom. When we look at the collection of tourist development tax, our portion of half-cent sales tax, as well as carving out the 1 mil allocation, collectively that's about $6.5 million. It's estimated that folks within the Northern 10 MSBU area contribute about 2.2 million of that in the way of contribution to tourism tax, half-cent sales tax, and the millage. And then looking at the bottom, that's how we get to the 1.7 million to kind of close that gap. So out of the 8.2, essentially folks on the barrier island contribute about 3.9 million of that expense, which is about 48%. And again, this is the language that we have shown you previously about the formation and under what authority and how this MSBU will cover routine maintenance, as well as any emergency declaration. It'll all be in accordance with state, federal, local acts, statutes, and regulatory procedures. And then when we look at the top scenario, which is the initial construction of the beach in Reach 3, and then again, it just kind of shows you what the total cost of construction being $57.5 million. We do have a state contribution, some grant funding, and then funding that we've been able to allocate. It brings that gap down to about 17.5 when we need this in 2 years. So by proposing the MSBU collections, we are estimating it to be about $3.4 million, and then the reallocation of millage at $3 million, and then the county's contribution being consistent with what we put in fiscal year 25, and assuming that we would carry that through in 26 and 27, it kind of closes that gap a little bit, but we still have $1 million gap towards the construction. Today's presentation has nothing to do with approving the funding. It's really just for the intent to use that uniform collection. I just want to give the background story for the sake of the audience and the public. The bottom scenario is when we look at the maintenance, ongoing maintenance over the 6-year interval, that amount will end up closing the gap. So one thing, as a follow-up to the last meeting, we did start the legal process moving forward with the concept that we had shared with you publicly. The MSBU, as previously proposed, would have included the base rate for the benefit received along with the property protection based on that property value. When we looked at this and we were working with legal, it doesn't appear that that's going to be the best case moving forward. So it is a little bit of a difference in what we have previously shown. But what we are looking at doing is splitting the amount between an MSBU, which would cover the base rate, the base benefit, and then the MSTU portion would actually be the section that we calculate based on property values. So we recognize that, this is a slight change in what we've previously presented. This new hybrid method does have us collecting the same amount. So the amount required does not change. It's just the formality of how we go about collecting it. So if you look on the left side, the MSBU, the amount is based on the benefit received. It's an assessment. Everybody would be paying the same amount in that assessment. It is considered non-ad valorem, and it needs to be established either prior to the end of December, which is the target that we're aiming for, but there is some wiggle room that could have us doing this up until March. Looking at the MSTU portion, again, that's the amount based on property value. Everybody would pay a different amount, again, because it's based on their taxable value. That is considered an ad valorem tax within that area. And this needs to be established prior to July. So as I mentioned before, it's just kind of laying out the process moving forward. I just wanted to give you that update as we continue to work through this. So looking at the significant work since we last met, I recognize it was only last month, but we've already got a lot of accomplishments, already significant work. So we did create the public notice. Again, this is just for the notice of intent to use the uniform method of collection using the tax bill. The approval of the notice of intent is scheduled for December 2nd. So today's meeting does not levy any amount. Even December 2nd does not levy any amount. It's really just for the approval of the intent. We'll continue to work through this as part of our budget process, and that'll be considered during the, once we start meeting in December all the way through July of next year. But we did, as I mentioned, we did start the legal review for that rationale nexus test. We already created the public notice. We have to have a minimum of 4. We actually have 5 consecutive advertisements going out to the public, notifying them of our intent. And then we've also looking at the evaluation of the cost and best method of collection. This is where the MSBU and MSTU model has now appeared. We do need to work with the property appraiser. We had reached out to get some cost estimates on what it would cost for the collection of fees from the property appraiser as well as the tax collector. And then we also need to take into account the estimated 4% reduction for people that pay in November rather than March. We also are evaluating the long-term local funding strategy. That's the tourist development tax, half-cent sales tax, and the general fund millage. I did pull together some information I had shared with the chair looking at that, but again, there is no determination made today on actual funding. I know that the operations and maintenance manual for the Army Corps Coastal Storm Risk Management Project that was provided to Flagler Beach. I believe they're meeting tomorrow. Our staff, along with the Army Corps, with the city of Flagler Beach, to discuss the obligations that the city has moving forward with the ongoing maintenance of the Army Corps section within Flagler Beach. We also are starting to work on the FEMA Cat B and Cat G estimates based on those impacts from Hurricane Milton. Part of that was the late submittal that we received from FOF, which came in on November 1st. But we are looking and working towards that already. Following our last meeting, I did notify by letter our coastal community partners, that's Flagler Beach, Beverly Beach, and Marineland, of today's meeting, letting them know that they do have an opportunity to join with this process, that today it's not done and over with, that there's still plenty of time for them to be involved. And then our next county commission meeting scheduled for November 4th. And that's really, again, today is just the consideration and approval of concept. We have more work to be done. So looking at next steps and timeline, we're going to continue with that legal review. Now that we've kind of changed the modeling a little bit, I do think we need to go back out and continue our community outreach between now and July of next year. We also have time for the creation and adoption of the MSBU, MSTU ordinance. We also need to create and adopt interlocal agreements with both the tax collector and property appraiser. You've got your county commission meeting on December 2nd, which is the public hearing for the MSBU consideration. Then we will notify Department of Revenue as required by law. And then we have to send out the notice to taxpayers on the benefit received. And then we're going to include this in the budget process, as I mentioned. We start in December. We'll finalize it next summer. And then we'll begin to do the collection of MSBU, MSTU revenues November of next year. And we can continue our discussions with the municipalities. And that pretty much ends the presentation.
Right. Thank you. Yep. Open up for questions.
Yeah, just you've covered this in the briefing very well, but just for my own benefit and because I'm slow on some of this stuff, but for this fiscal year, which started October 1st, which we've already approved, and that goes through next October 1st, we've committed $5 million out of funds that's already been approved. So anything beyond that for fiscal year 26 will have to be approved in the budget process. So if we approve this, what we're heading towards on December 2nd, that doesn't lock those dollars in yet, right? It won't lock it in until the budget process goes through next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You're not approving any funding at this point. If you recall last year, it's similar to what's done in Nassau County every year. We brought before you last year kind of that same concept, the creation of an MSBU, and we kind of identified, it could be for public safety, it could be for EMS, it could be for roads, it could be for stormwater. It's a tool in the toolbox. It is not obligating this board to any financial commitment. It is just putting it out there that it is under consideration, the intent to use this tool. It doesn't mean that you even have to move forward with it, but there is a requirement that we need to notify the state. So we're just going through the formal steps to make that tool available should the board decide to do that with the preparation of the budget.
And just my last point on that. And so any additional funding coming from individual homeowners or the ad valorem tax or whatever, that couldn't start until the start of the next fiscal year. And you talked about January, December, January, March. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
So it would be next year. So if the board were to adopt this and we were to implement it, you won't start collecting those dollars until October 1st is when your budget comes out.
Right.
Most people pay their taxes or pay their bills November. So essentially, that time frame is when people would start paying.
That's my only point, that that's, and then we're talking about January of '26, before any more than the $5 million, unless we get some grants, is going to be available. Okay, you've covered that, but for my own benefit, I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Petito?
I have questions.
Go ahead.
Greg, okay. I have questions. And maybe it's really for Mr. Hadid probably. So there was some public outreach via email and calls this weekend. And so I know, just to kind of talk about it, and I'm hoping we workshop this in between now and December 2nd. I'm interested in the legal review portion. The public costs, I know you gave us the slide that said here the ad valorem generally could be applied to the public access parks, right? The 1.7 million, the Point Mill allocation would generally go to that, correct? Is that what you're seeing?
I think what I was trying to say is there's a direct connection between preserving and protecting a public asset.
Right.
That it makes a correlation that's where it could be applied, yes.
So when we do that, the tourism tax in the statute says to finance any kind of beach restoration, it would have to be where there is public access, as those users relate to the physical preservation of the beach. So how do we see I know in Reach 3, and stop me if I'm wrong, Reach 3 is primarily dune restoration, correct?
It'll be both. We have a permit modification being considered, or actually needs to be worked on, for not just the dune, but also the building back of the beach. So it would include both, not just dune, it would be the beach.
I think what I want to see is how we intend to apply each bucket into what reach. So that I know that some of this is considered, and stop me, Al, and you can answer this, Al, is some of this private beach, private dune?
We don't have any private beaches.
Well, go ahead.
There are parcels, privately owned parcels, that extend all the way to the mean high water line or the erosion control line, depending which of the two are in place. We don't have that uniformly in place yet. But nevertheless, we do have that privately owned. However, the county took the step, based on the state statute in 2018, to declare customary public use of the entirety of its beachfront, which means that the entirety of the 18 miles is public beach, regardless of private ownership.
So I read that ordinance, and I think maybe that we'll take this offline because I realize that today is just to draft the resolution. I read that ordinance, and it says that this ordinance pertains to the dry sand portion of the beach between the mean high water line and the toe of the dune. So what is the toe of the dune?
The toe of the dune is where customary use begins.
Begins? Or it says here, this ordinance pertains to the dry sand portion of the beach between the mean high water line and the toe of the dune.
It's really referring to, commonly referred to as towel space, where people can use the beach.
Would it include the actual dune?
Well, we would never allow public to walk on the dunes
dune.
because it's against not only state law, but our own ordinances.
But would that leave the dune private? Not in reach of customary use? I guess those are questions we'll work out as we go through this.
You can't have a beach without the dunes.
I think I'll meet with you separately because I know that today this is not to figure out exactly how we apply that, but I think there's some confusion in that seems to be going on, like in Fort Walton Beach recently, and how the customary use is applied. So I think that's my concern. The tourism tax specifically states in the statute it's to be used for restoration where there's public access. We're talking about applying 0.1 mil, and we're we're saying that that the 0.1 mil is where the public access would be used. You know, and so I'm wondering how the tourism tax gets applied if we're allocating 2 buckets to where the public access is.
I would just say this. The declaration of customary use makes the entirety of our beach a public beach, even though portions of it may be privately owned. There is indeed public access to, by law, to every bit of 18 miles. It is naturally prohibited that anyone erect any barrier or attempt to hinder or impede any public use of that beach.
Yeah, my concern is always going to come down to how the buckets of different money is applied, the tourism, and I think we'll just have to work it out. And I'd like to, hopefully, we'll have a workshop in between now and then to see what the legal review discussion is. So.
Other questions? You got more?
No.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson, no other questions?
No, we've been working on this for 8 years, and the making the beaches all public was one of the big steps that we took, so that the funding could be spread. So, yeah, I encourage you, Leanne, to get with a lawyer
Yeah.
on that, because it's
Yeah, I'm gonna-
really
I'm
pretty
gonna
clear to
show
me,
him.
but I've been working on it for 8 years, too.
I know, but
So-
I would like
So,
talk specifically about in Reach 3, some of it with you.
We'll talk about workshop
Yeah.
at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, workshop.
Commissioner O'Brien, anything? All right. The only comments I'll have is I know, again, at the end of the week, I got quite a few emails and discussions, one-on-one with the administrator just to get answers, answers to those was, I think that this is not the end of the process, this meeting here today. It's really just to get the MSBU portion by statute moving along. We've got to make these specific steps by the end of December in order for this to be a viable tool in the toolbox. We are still going to be working all the way through July on the funding portion. And I guess a question is for today, are you looking at a consensus, and maybe this is for Al, are we voting on this concept and approving the concept of the MSBU to move it forward, or we just need consensus from the board to move this forward so that we will approve it in December?
I think it's consensus to move forward, but I would also ask the county administrator to weigh in as to her intent.
Okay.
And also just to provide any guidance on the resolution, the draft resolution that's we've presented, if there's anything you'd like to see changed or.
Okay, so I guess I'll open it up if there's any potential changes to the verbiage in the resolution that you wanted to discuss up here.
Did we
Commissioner
have
Sullivan.
both MSBU's and the other one in the language prior to today?
no, that's a change.
How does that affect things?
If I could, what's in front of you today is just the MSBU. The MSTU will not come before you until sometime prior to July 1st. So for today's consideration, it is only the MSBU and the intent to use that uniform collection through the tax bill.
The MSTU has a different set of requirements separate
And it
from
has
this.
to be
Yes.
approved. Okay,
right.
okay. So that goes along with your point, my point, that there's still work to be done here.
Absolutely.
Over the next,
Absolutely.
over the next, okay, no.
And if we don't make any changes today, then this is the language. Like if we workshop and come up with changes, say at a workshop in a week, does it have to be renoticed, those changes, or can those changes be accepted and moved to December?
The publication is already out there and it's very vague, intended to be vague. What'll come back to you, we can discuss it at a workshop. If you'd like to have one scheduled, we can schedule one between now and December 2nd to work on the resolution, but you have time. It doesn't affect the advertisement, which is already out there.
So you just wanted to make sure there was consensus to move this forward, so we're not wasting any more time, staff time. You get a clear identification from the commission that this is a concept to move forward to December and continue to work on it.
Correct.
Okay. At this point, yes, sir.
Just, I'm not speaking for Commissioner O'Brien, but we'll be gone December 2nd. You'll have 2 new commission members here. So I would suggest that if you're going to have a workshop prior to the December 2nd meeting, you do it after November 19th. So they get involved with it, because it's going to be their
Point
their
taken.
stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. At this time, I'll open this item up for public comment. If you would like to speak on this item, come up, state your name. You have 3 minutes. I was almost ready to close it down. You got to move quick.
Hello, Steve Daly,
Good morning.
Flagler Beach. I just have a question. Is this the first time we've ever used an MSBU? And if it is, are we opening the door to, if someone benefits the most, we're going to tax them more? I mean, I don't understand why we would do this on this. We don't do it on schools. If you benefit the most and have kids in schools, you should have an MSBU. I don't understand. If you still spread it out to everybody in the county has the beach. I mean, the county always, and the cities like Palm Coast, push a lot saying about the Flagler Beach they get to use or have or advertise for, and then they don't want to pay. You're still, those few people that live in this non-city areas are going to pay more for their beach renourishment. We should all pay for their beach renourishments because it's all 18 miles of the same county. So if we still spread it out more, they pay less. And you start doing this special tax because we want this project, you're going to do it on everything for someone who wants something more or benefits more. I still don't understand. You benefit more, so you pay more. There's a lot of services I don't use. I don't know why I pay taxes for them. It'd be the same thing. So I just have a little question on that, and still why we didn't incorporate the actual cities on the beachfront from the beginning, because everybody comes to our beach, Flagler Beach. It's not, they come from the county to our beach. And so you didn't put them in the discussions from the beginning. You wait till after the fact to have workshops. Doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll address those at the end of public comment.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Kate Thomas, Casey Colony. I've been involved in terms of attending these workshops since prior to June, but specifically to this topic since June 2024. I attended the 3 June and 10 June presentations by the consultant. My recollection is that an MSTU had been discussed, and then we were told that it was not to be used, it could not be used. So then subsequently, I also went to the public outreach presentations and didn't hear anything about an MSTU. It's the first time I'm hearing the MSTU yet again. So I think it's questionable how you could move forward on something when this model is a brand new model that's being introduced to you for evaluation and consideration, as well as us community members. I just have a couple questions that I would encourage you to also inquire about. How many respondents were there to the survey? Because in the slide, I only saw percentages. I'd like to know how many people actually responded. How will HOAs, condo associations, and commercial properties be assessed, if assessed, in this unincorporated area? Again, why are tourists and other county residents who do use the beach not being assessed? I think that there should be introduced a maximum limit to which a property value can be assessed, since it's being utilized in this formula for valuation. Commissioner Pennington, I encourage you to continue your inquiry because I think you're asking incredibly important questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Marie Elena Calabrese, and I live in Sea Colony. I am very confused. I don't quite understand everything, so I'll be honest. I don't understand why, if the beach is public, which I agree, everybody can use the beach. So I don't understand why the people who live on the barrier island are being asked to pay more money because everyone is using the beach anyway. I don't see why we are being penalized. I mean, we could look at it the other way. We're being penalized enough when they come and they clog up our streets and dirty the beaches and leave all their junk behind. You know, we haven't addressed that. The other thing, I don't know if it pertains to this, but I don't understand, and I wish someone would explain it, why up at Marineland, they have these huge boulders that protects, and it does protect. I've watched them for 30 some odd years. Why don't we use a system like that along our entire beachfront and stop using, and then put sand on top? Because every time we're just spending money, tons of money, and it's going to disappear. I was told years ago that this was only a stopgap, that nothing was ever going to stay there. So has anyone ever thought about why they have boulders and the rest of the beach does not? And their beach doesn't disappear like ours does? I know it's a strange question, but I've been dying to ask it for many years. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Hamilton, Island Estates. I'm glad we don't have to take too much time today trying to argue over this because there's still more time to go. And each meeting we come to seems to be a little bit more another development. You know, we didn't talk about MSTUs before, although the principle is the same. I know since the last meeting when I came and spoke to you about some things, you've had various letters. I know my association president sent some. My colleagues in the Hammock Civic Association have sent some questions. I was hoping we might have heard some discussion of those questions and answers today. That's still to come. I'm glad we still got workshops and things like that. I still vehemently dispute some of the assumptions that you're making, and that again will come. But you're right here that half of the assessment will be correlated with each property's volume. And the rationale is that more valuable properties receive a greater benefit through flood damage reduction. Milton showed us that flood damage reduction is completely independent from what happens at the beach. So that's one of my big issues, that we'll be questioning that rationale as we go forward. The flat rate isn't really an issue. What are we talking? $160 per property. But what I do notice when I started to apply this to individual properties, and I think you should have your staff give you some examples of individual properties. We have some properties with a value on the Intracoastal Waterway that are the same or excess of those on the beach. We have commercial properties up and down. If you look at the taxation of the Hammock Beach Resort and Golf Course, it's not much more than one of our larger single-family houses. And yet its frontage on the ocean is that much greater. There seems to me a great disparity on that. So I think you should look at that for your next workshop. And I also think you should look at perhaps the The results of Milton were fortunate. It wasn't that severe here, but it did have flooding impacts. It had some beach erosion. We've seen that there. Is the equilibration theory working? What did happen to the sand in Flagler Beach that went out to the ocean? Is it still there? I know we were flying the LiDAR drones. I haven't seen what the results were of that. Or is it like it happened 2 or 3 years ago that the sand actually started moving south and reappeared in Daytona Beach? That's a fundamental question that I think you now have an opportunity to look at the assumptions behind the beach management plan, and are they still valid? Hopefully they are, but I think you should look at it before you make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. All right, seeing then we'll bring it back. All right, Ms. Petito, did you want to address some of these, some of the other MSBUs that are in the county?
Certainly.
Go ahead and question. Go ahead, and then I'll remind you of the other ones that I wrote down.
I'll try to remember everything, and I may need help from county attorney, but we have several MSBUs in Flagler County that we've used, whether it's in Daytona North, Bimini Gardens, the Marine Land Acres Drainage Project was also MSBU, or one that we use. So the use of an MSBU is not new to Flagler County. It is something that we've used before. The difference, I think the correlation was schools don't do it. Schools aren't allowed to do it. That's why they don't use that method. So there's not everything we do can apply the same way to the school system. I don't know if there was more I needed to say there, but the thought of using an MSTU or MSBU for this project is not new news. This is something, if you recall, Stan with PFM, who came and gave the presentation early on, he talked about the two of them. When he was presenting it, he felt that we could do the one as just the benefit unit, which is the method that we started working on when our own attorney's office weighed in based on consultation with the attorney that is with Neighbors Gimlin, who does the Nassau County. Yes, when Nassau County originally did this, they used the MSBU method. Back in 2010, they switched it over. So now it is a different method that they're recommending. It doesn't mean that you can't do the MSBU and MSTU. Again, the amount that we're collecting is not changing. We're not using two different methods to now collect more than we need. It just is the makeup of how you're collecting the same amount of money. It's just that you're not doing it with one method. It's now split between two. We can't use boulders on the beach. We've talked about this over and over again. We went up to Tallahassee with Commissioner Hansen, met with the head of DEP. The use of what we're doing is what got approved. You have to go through various environmental studies and regulatory agencies, and at the end of the day, they determine what we can do. We can't just go out there and do whatever we want in the way of boulders, concrete, seawall, jetties, wave attenuators. We have to get a permit. It's regulatory. This is the method in which they're recommending that we move forward. There was some mention of, how come we're excluding the cities? That is not the case. We've been talking about this for months, and I'll even go back to July 15th. The city of Flagler Beach reached out to me asking for what topics do we want to discuss. The same day, I brought it to you at one of our meetings on July 15th, and I emailed them that night while at one of our meetings, telling them, number one, beach renourishment. Let's talk about roads and impact fees. Let's talk about stormwater and the issues that we're seeing across the county, as well as the cities. And then we asked for a status on an easement on an economic development prospect. That was relayed to the city clerk. They talked about it in Flagler Beach on July 25th, and then again on August 22nd. The city of Flagler Beach came back with the recommendation, even though we had picked 5 different dates that we could meet. Flagler Beach said, let's wait until after the election. So it's not because we are purposely excluding anybody. We've tried to bring them in. We've tried to bring them to the table to talk about it. We have no authority jurisdiction within their community to impose anything. That's why we need them to be at the table. That's why we're only looking at and considering today unincorporated Flagler County. I don't know if I've missed anything.
There was the number of respondents to the survey.
Oh, sorry. We had 807 respondents to the survey. When we looked at the nexus between what translates to a valid survey, and I had it on the previous slide, and if I could, I'll pull it back up from when I presented it at our last meeting, when we were trying to determine whether or not a survey was valid. Let me just pull it up real quick, sorry. We had 807 received, but when we were evaluating and creating it, we wanted to make sure that it had statistical validity. In other words, the degree to which the survey results can be considered accurate and reliable moving forward. When we were looking at our target audience of 6775 with 99% confidence level and a 5% margin of error, what was determined was the ideal number of surveys we needed to collect was 604. We actually exceeded it and received 807 from the community. So therefore, we felt that there's a high degree of confidence in the survey results and that it reflects the opinions of the target audience.
And then finally on HOAs and tourism.
I don't know if I missed something with that, but the properties, we still have a lot of due diligence to do, and we're still working through the process. Right now, we were looking at the base rate, and then we were looking at the property value. If the property has a value, it will be receiving a benefit, and therefore it will be receiving a base rate and a tax on the property's value. So nobody's being excluded. Again, it's based on the property's value.
And I guess the tourism component is through TDC, through the allocation.
And right now, the TDC allocation, although we carved out $2 million out of the fund to put it towards this project, moving forward, we still need to determine. So we're not talking today about, 2 pennies or 2 of the 5. That's going to be a discussion that we need to have moving forward. But I believe, based on the comments of customary use, in that we have a public beach, that tourists use the entire beach, that they're not segregated to just going to Flagler Beach or to these, county or state parks. Many properties have beach access at the end of the road where tourists, go there. They're vacation rentals. A lot of them exist in the hammock, and the beach is there, and tourists are using it. So,
All right. I think that covered all the questions. Thank you. So I'll bring it back to the dais for consensus. If there's any changes to the language, let me know. We can talk about changes to the language. Otherwise, we'll just give. I'll ask everybody to verbally give their approval for the resolution, so we have a kind of a head count on consensus.
Yeah, I think we should move forward.
Okay, Commissioner Pennington.
I'm okay with moving it forward if we're going to workshop it.
Okay. Commissioner
Forward at this
Sullivan.
point.
Commissioner O'Brien.
I just want to say a couple things since this will probably
Absolutely.
be my last time to
Sure.
comment on it from the dais. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for the thoughtful and well-reasoned arguments and the emails that we received. I must tell you, serving over the 8 years of serving as a commissioner, that's probably the best series of emails that I've received, well-written and thoughtful, and again, a lot of facts, so much appreciated. I think about the famous economist, Dr. Thomas Sowell. Something that always sticks with me when you're up here trying to make policy decisions is he said, there's really no solutions to any policy problems. There's only a series of trade-offs. And this is not a perfect solution, but if you acknowledge the trade-offs, it helps you to make decisions and keep projects moving forward. And I think that's what we're trying to do here today. And lastly, I would just say, in thinking about this whole thing and all the work we've done on it, the staff presentations, the community meetings, the vetting, the legal work, in my opinion, I think this is a fair, it's an equitable, and it's a legal process. I think it's a well-reasoned and sustainable plan. I think that it's been properly presented by staff to the stakeholders in the community, the property owners, and the citizens. And my hope is that the resolution process keeps moving forward and that the resolution gets approved in December. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. And I'll acknowledge my consensus along with the other four. So continue to work on this as one of the tools in your toolbox. All right. We will move on. Let me find my... So an 8D is consideration of a resolution to form the Flagler